Myself I know I got to get myself an LED up in this drink.
Is that what this is?
Huh? The light behind you, the camera. That. I like the way that it bounced off them pink walls.
Yeah.
Chill when you get I know when you in your new spot, it's gonna be. Ooh, you gonna have to.
I'm gonna be in my new spot. So I have one last. You think you know here.
On Tuesday.
The next you think you know will be in my new place.
You're gonna have to buy LED lights, string the LED lights, and make your room pink. So you gonna have a spot for the podcast, or you gonna have a room in there?
There's another room, so I made that my game room. I'll turn it into
something. He got the podcast Stewie in the crib. Chill, Jenny.
What is the word? Kind of going off of the title. Once we go ahead and get started, I have a question for Brian. I haven't seen it. What do you look? First of all, you're crooked.
Better.
I'm confused as to what's going on.
I am too.
Are you done, sir?
Right.
Chilling and screaming very loudly at the dogs.
Gus
has done something that she is not happy about. Whatever it is,
a number of things.
Whatever it is, it's not good, and I'm going to hear about it after this, and I'm scared.
It's okay.
So this is now a 24-hour podcast.
It's February, so it's all right.
This is a 24-hour podcast. We'll be here.
Hell no.
We'll be here all night. So welcome in. What do you say, Dad?
So the scary thing is I could talk that long.
That's right. That's just buckle
in.
That's
the Johnson in you, I guess.
Buckle in. It's gonna be a long ride. All right, let's get this party started. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to a brand new episode of the AfroLatinos Podcast. This is your co-host, Alvin.
And your co-host, I'm Super Cold Chandler, and that's not a cool nickname. I am just genuinely cold.
You don't have a hoodie on today, so
I have the long sleeve though.
Oh, the long sleeve. All right. Well, tonight on our monthly episode of the AfroLatinos Podcast, we have decided to welcome in a very, very special guest. Tonight, we are going to be talking about representation of people of color in film. We're going to be talking about diversity in film. We're basically talking about movies, and I could not think of a better person to talk about movies than an acclaimed author on several books about movies, including the topics of diversity in film, Reverend Dr. Brian Johnson. Sir, how are you this evening?
I'm doing well, thank you.
All right.
C. Johnson. If there's no C, it's not me.
Hey, with the and he's a rapper. If there ain't no C,
I'm not surprised. At this point, the guy, Mr. Sir Dr. Reverend Brian, got all the kind of all sorts of what are they called? Surnames, nicknames, kind of beginning. What was that?
Credentials.
Exactly.
He got the credits and the credentials. All right, Reverend Dr. Brian C. Johnson, can you do us a quick favor? Introduce yourself to the audience. Let us know who you are, what you're about. Let them know why you're an expert in the field.
Hey, y'all. I'm the Reverend Dr. Brian C. Johnson, a.k.a. the Auburn's dad. So,
our father. Thank you very much.
For the better part of the last 20 years, I have been a teacher of film studies. I've taught at Susquehanna University and Bloomsburg University. And I've written several books on film, as Alvin mentioned. My first book is called Real Diversity. Looks at film, teaching film with movies. And then I've written a book called The Problematic Tyler Perry. And I've written books on Glee and various other topics. I'm just a real film fanatic. Yeah, that's me.
All right. Well, we appreciate you spending your evening with us. Go ahead, Cheney.
I have a question. So how do you kind of not really come up, but like decide to do a book on kind of I know the problematic Tyler Perry. I'm gonna assume and completely guess that it has to do with just Tyler Perry's problematic ways and what he does in his movies. Just assume. But like, how do you come? Like, do you just you kind of watch all this stuff and you just kind of decide that you're just gonna kind of do like a review about it, or?
Well, a lot of it is.
Well, let me put a pause on that real quick. That's a fantastic question. Let's save that question and answer for right after the intro. Give us 1 second. Come back. Hold that thought. I'll give you a couple seconds to think about your answer. Here we go. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Like I got this and like. I don't seem as upset in those clips anymore. Just like one or two.
Oh, I did better on that one. All right. Now let's continue that conversation. So Cheney asked before the intro, how do you kind of start writing about film? Like, where does that idea come from? What gives you the kind of the inspiration to write a book about film? So Pops, go ahead and take it away.
So thank you, Cheney. It is a good question. I think for me, at least, because since all of my knowledge base is in diversity, I teach diversity issues in college. So I think where I found the impetus to write was basically looking for resources for myself, and I realized that there wasn't a lot out there, so I decided to write it for myself. Yeah, so that's the same way. Like I started speaking, I was going to a lot of professional conferences, and there was very little for me, and so then I started offering various workshops that I think people need to hear. So that brought about my speaking career.
There we go. All right, so take us back a little bit. Let's go back to the beginning. Where do you find your first love of film before we start to really talk about the issues of diversity and things that we see in pop culture and movies? Take us back. Let us know a little bit about you and your love of movies. Where does it come from?
I watched a whole lot of movies when I was a kid. So I think my love of movies comes from being the fat kid in my family and just watching movies all the time.
Okay. Any particular movies that stand out as kind of instrumental in shaping your film love?
Yeah.
Anything that stands out for you?
The first movie that really comes to mind for me is The Breakfast Club.
Okay.
It was the first movie where I saw myself represented in the movie. You ever been watching a movie and you just said, man, that was me. That was my experience.
No, I can't say that. I also don't watch movies, so but
It's a tragic thing, but it's a work in progress.
Hey, I watched Free Guy yesterday though. But go ahead, Dan.
I watched it today.
It was good. I liked
It's a great movie. I saw it in the movie theater. It was fantastic. Fantastic in the form of I enjoyed watching it.
I like Ryan Reynolds.
I love Ryan Reynolds.
Really good, decent job with it.
I have a question. So I know you've from the collection that I've seen, you have a gajillion movies. Do you? And you're not to. I'm gonna cut that out because I was gonna ask. I know you've had a couple of extra years of experience on this. Do you remember either the first movie that you started with, like, okay, I'm just gonna get all these movies and keep them, or at least the movies that made you decide, okay, I'm gonna start buying these movies and collecting them, basically?
So the first movies in my collection Is that the question?
Yeah.
Excuse me. No, I don't know the first movie in my collection.
That's
But I do
unfortunate.
know that as an educator, as somebody who uses film, copyright law requires me to own the films that I use. So I started collecting films because I had to.
And so take us back to what is the first book you've ever written? Was it the Real Diversity, the first edition? That was the first book
Real
you
Diversity
ever
is my first book.
co-authored. And so what, you grow up with this love of movies, you have some movies that stood out to you that you remember seeing yourself in, and that kind of formed your love of film. So how do you transition from an avid film watcher to then, using film to teach and using it then in your speaking? Because of course I know your life because you're my dad, but how do you go from just an avid movie watcher like maybe Cheney or just an average Joe? You're an avid
Don't
movie
ever
watcher.
compare me to an average movie watcher.
Avid, AVID,
Oh.
avid. Speaking of avid, I'm about to do the Wordle while you're talking because I forgot about it today and I don't want to miss it. But how does one go from, and this is for your personal life, Dad? How do you go from movie watcher to I'm now going to write my first book? And what led you to wanting to be an author? All of that. How did that all happen for you?
So, Real Diversity was born out of sheer hubris. I was working at Susquehanna University, and at the time, I was the director of Multicultural Affairs. And there, being a member of Student Affairs, the president of the university used every year at the convocation would say he would thank all the students for being there because the students are the lifeblood of the university, is what he said. And then he would recognize the faculty, and then that was it. He would not say anything about student affairs program. I'm like, wait a minute. I have a degree. I'm smart. I'd offer something to this university too.
Mm-hmm.
So in some ways, I wanted to prove to my colleagues that I myself was a scholar.
Mm.
And so I decided I'm going to write a book, because in higher ed, that's the way you prove yourself.
Just for ships and giggles, I'm no cursing today.
You're doing good. You already did in the beginning of the episode, but that's okay. Keep going.
Shit. Okay. How long was that kind of like that process of doing that, especially that first book? And I'm also kind of asking for any book that you've written. How long would that process kind of take, and like what are the steps that you took for that?
It's different for each person, and it's different each time. So with Real Diversity, the first time it's probably about a year.
Mm-hmm.
But that's big. Now that's why it took me that long to think, because I didn't know what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to learn like what to write when. And I was working full time. I was a student part of that time. Just learning the ropes.
I have currently 2 years now that I started a book. It's still a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I have not touched it in months, but it's a combination of, I think I spoke to you about this before, slightly, but it's like, it's the first time I'm ever doing anything like it. So I'm a little confused as to how to go about it, and have that perfectionist in my head that it's just like, it's not good enough. I don't like the story. I have to change it. I don't like where this is going right now. I have to go back and then do it again, kind of stuff. So
Yeah, so fiction is a whole lot different than academic books like I was writing. So you're writing fiction, I assume?
Yeah.
Fiction is a lot. I think it's not faster, but it's easier. But the problem is that we have this internal editor that likes to talk a lot, and so we end up doubting ourselves the whole time. And so the easiest thing I would tell you is just to write it, because there's no such thing as a finished book. I have 8 books in my name right now, and I would rewrite every one of them today if I could.
That's a fair statement.
So tell us about the writing process for you. When you, especially writing that first book, in your first book, if I remember correctly, as a co-author. So what was that process like? And tell us about the process of once you've written your first manuscript, and then how do you go about finding this? And we'll get to the topic that we were planning to talk about, but this is interesting for those who are planning to write or want to write and kind of want to know, how does one do this as someone who just kind of did it? And then you've even written, your historical nonfiction and your other books that you've written. So how does one go about, you've written your first manuscript, you have to find an editor, you have to find a publisher. Like, how does that whole process work? What does it look like? And for a first-time author, what kind of feelings were you feeling about the whole process? Was there ever a point where you wanted to give up, where you just thought it's not worth it anymore? So talk to us about that.
So let me put it this way. On my website, I have this quote. Look at that real quick. It says, "Writing is hard work. It is also the best job I've ever had." So I think that's because I study what I write. So because I understand about diversity, and there's not a lot out there. Particularly that I was being thoughtful about in terms of my work with teachers. So I went to a conference, and as I want to do is walk around the exhibit hall, checking stuff out. And I went to a table and started talking to the clerk who was working there. And I said, hey, I write about film and diversity. What are you looking for? And so the person that was there, long story short, was one of the most respected media scholars in the country. In fact, I had actually quoted her in my book. And so I thought that was a God moment. And so she happens to be the editor of a book series. And so I pitched her my idea, and she told me what she was looking for. And she, literally explained my book to a T. So I just so happened to be carrying some pages, what I had. And I pulled it out of my briefcase and said, "Is this what you're looking for?" And I showed it to her. And she said, "This is exactly what I'm looking for." That's why, Cheney, I tell you that everybody wants to write a book. Nobody wants to finish a book. So you got to finish it. Otherwise, it's no good. So that lady, as a media scholar, and she's on the board of several different publishers, she has really become a champion for me. Matter of fact, she and I are doing a book together now on horror films. We just signed the contract yesterday. So I think that, and I began to look at part of this process is understanding what the field needs in terms of what they're looking for. So I wanted to know, what do teachers need today, and what's being offered by the marketplace. And so once you understand those things, you can write towards that. So a lot of the understanding of the book market is understanding what people want.
Mm-hmm.
and what they need.
All right. All right. So let's. Chin, do you have anything else about authoring, writing, that process?
I'm sure it'll come up. I happen to be his son's best friend, so
We know where to find him. All right. Cool. All right. Let's take a quick break to hear about our sponsor for today's episode, Anchor. And Chin, you
No!
wanna-
I'm here. Look,
So we are going to take a quick break to hear from about our sponsor, Anchor, for today's episode. We will be right back in just a second. So we'll be back.
are we back?
We're back, Jimmy. And we're back. All right. So on the you had it. Oh, you got to be quicker than that. It don't work on. Why do you go through OBS? It doesn't work. Your
I don't
input
go.
just
This is
through
OBS.
It comes up with the OBS virtual camera thing.
Yeah, if I switch to the other camera.
Oh, it did that automatically then. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So on the first half of the episode, we were talking about authorship, writing. So now let's dive into the focus conversation of today's episode. So, Dad, as you said, you've written several books on diversity in film. And so let's talk about what you see in terms of representation, and we can talk just of Blackness as it is Black History Month. You can talk about other peoples if you'd like, but talk to us about your views on diversity in the film and movie industry. What do you see as a what's the word I'm looking for? As a scholar in the field.
Well, a lot of what, and this goes back to your earlier question, like what was I looking for? So a lot of times, what I see is I'm looking for patterns.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're watching something from a scholarly standpoint, you're looking for patterns and how often you see certain things. And regarding representation, that's something that everybody needs to pay attention to. And so when we talk, let's talk about Blackness for a second.
Mm-hmm.
In 2018, Black Panther came out.
Mm-hmm.
And when I tell you, I had Wakanda fever, right? So part of what made that film stand out was the fact that it was first of its kind.
What do you mean by that?
Like it did not follow the typical patterns that we often see, where Black people are drug addicts, violent, confrontational, stupid, poor, and coonish. So, but it was a film that was beautifully shot, and it had a real self-awareness to it, and power, because it was as I would say a very uplifting film. That it was the first movie where I think Black people could see themselves, and they alluded to this in the film, that it was without white folks' interference.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the first being able to say, "Oh yeah, if white people hadn't come to Africa, maybe this could have been what we were like."
Mm-hmm.
So that film became. That semester, I was teaching a course a film course at Bloomsburg University. It had 135 students in the class, and I said when that movie's preview started coming out, I'm taking my students to that, and so I took my class to the movies that day. And when I tell you 135 students watched that movie, and there were maybe 10 Black students in that class. including myself. All of us were wearing African clothes. And it was really a powerful moment. And as I think about it now, it's probably the highlight of my teaching career. Because for me, when you think about what we're studying and what is the impact, because a lot of people say to me, why can't you just watch a movie? And for me, it's more than just entertainment. It's about what are we learning? And in that movie, it gave us a chance to look at ourselves and look at what we came from, what could be. And the idea that this fictional land, Wakanda, could be so much more, could be, it let me think that there is more that we could be offering. It's a really powerful movie.
So what are, as we talk about blackness, and we talk about that representation, what do you see, and you've kind of alluded to this already, but kind of talk a little bit more specifically if you're able to, what are some common tropes, and Cheney and I did an episode a long time ago now about common tropes in film, but what are some tropes that you often would ascribe to blackness in film? What do you think that those tropes are? Some of the more popular ones, that is.
Well, let me utilize the scholarly work of his name, Walter Boyer, and he wrote a book that was called Mammies, Coons, Toms.
Every time you get so surprised.
Bucks, and a lot of it is is on the main black tropes in film. So the Bucks are the violent, angry black men. Then it looked at the mammy type, and the coon, who is the funny guy, the comic relief, and then I'm blanking on the last one. But whatever it is. But the idea is black people have not gotten a fair shake in the film industry. And we have never been portrayed as something positive.
Shaking my head.
And so the idea is, because we have learned a lot from movies about who we are and who others are. And so it becomes, what are the constant things we're learning about black people? They're poor. They're I remember a book I read in college, The Devil, the Gargoyle, and the Buffoon. So, he was the devil because of the way he looked, and he was supposedly born of Satan. The gargoyle, again, related to his looks, and the buffoon is about his level of intelligence. So if you think about the fact that black people have never been afforded the humanity that they deserve, that this idea that we don't get to see black people in all their glory. And that for me was pretty sad. I think that sometimes people, because of the regularity that we see different images, we don't learn to question what's going on. So it becomes more of, this is what we see. It must be the way it is.
It must be who we have to be.
Yeah.
It actually reminds me, and this is the saddest conversation I ever heard. It reminds me of a conversation that I had with a student a couple weeks ago. Actually, this is a black student, and I was just, he's being a knucklehead. in school, just skipping class and goofing off and doing all types of stuff you're not supposed to do. And I have this internal monologue as a teacher, as a Black teacher, that tells me that I have to try and educate everyone about everything possible. And so, I wanted to find out. There's a question that made me wonder, and I had to know. And there were two questions. The first was, as a Black student, how do you see yourself? Does your Blackness affect who you are, the way that you act, the way that you participate in school? And then the second one was kind of similar to that. And, my thought was, why are you, is rather simple. Why are you acting up? Like, why is this what you're choosing to do? And I asked the question, is this what you think a Black student is supposed to be? Like the person that skips school, the person that's a class clown, the person that doesn't show up for classes, that does all, like, why are you doing that? Is it because you think that is what a Black student is supposed to be like in school? And his answer nearly made me cry, because his answer was yes. He said it was about, I don't remember the percentage, like 75-25, 75%. Yes, that's what I think I'm supposed to do, because that's what all of my friends who are Black do. So that must be what a Black student does. And number two was just because he thought it was funny. And so I think that thought process comes from a lot of what we see, as we look at Blackness. As I see things in pop culture, to be Black, there's a number of things that we are. Excuse me. Number one is an entertainer in some way. So we have to succeed in athletics or music or theater, movies. Somehow we have to be, Denzel Washington. We have to be Daniel Kaluuya. We have to be some type of entertainment. And if we're not entertainment, then we're a thug, or we are in the streets, we're selling drugs, we're doing all this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And those are kind of the two spheres that we're allowed to operate in. And there has to be more to my story than just tragedy. So when we watch movies, and I've said this, I don't remember, I feel like we talked about it on here with someone. No, this must have been a student. No, this was another conversation I had with a student, with the white student actually. And I was like, when my stories are told, when there are stories that are told about my history and my ancestors, we are athletes, we're musicians, we are selling drugs on the street. This is who we are. And if we're not that, we're slaves. Every story that's ever told about us, every movie that is ever made about us, is specific to one of those particular fields. And I said, where is our movie about Black people just being people? Like, why do our stories have to live in tragedy? Why do our stories have to live in trauma? Why can't we just be? Where is the Black hangover, where you got four guys who are just going on a trip, who are doing stupid things together and just living life as people? And the sad thing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, or if you have a different opinion of this, but I feel like, those movies are not, movies are made so that people buy tickets, right? To entertain people. And unfortunately, a movie where you have four Black actors just doing random stuff, like in The Hangover, those tickets aren't going to sell, because those aren't the stories that people want to see of us. And that's sad, because then the only image that we ever see of ourselves in movies and TV are the negative ones. And that directly affects the way that we see ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I have two things on that.
Mhm.
So, one sad thing that I noticed, obviously I've noticed a while ago, but like you start to think about it more, like especially now,
Mhm.
and like one sad, basically a trope, where if it's a horror movie and there's a Black person in it,
We die first, Cheney.
they have to be the ones to die first. Where if it was realistically,
I'm out. I'm not staying in the woods.
They realistically they should be the longest to survive. They should
Yeah,
not
because
even be
we're not
involved.
staying in there. What's that? You heard something downstairs? All right, I'm gonna catch y'all later. You heard a kid? You think there's a killer in the woods? All right, heard you. I'm in my car. I'm gone. I'm not staying around. I'm not gonna go in. What I'm gonna do to go investigate? What I'm gonna do?
But although Tyler Perry has a certain kind of like that whole they live normal lives thing going on for kinda. I know you spoke about Daniel Kaluuya, so it
perfect segue there too.
brought the thought of Jordan Peele, right? Jordan Peele and what he's been doing recently. Well, yeah, kind of recently. I know they've been horror movies, but the thing that Daniel Kaluuya has been doing in those movies, they've all been one different. And any movie that he's been also, it was Black Panther. He was in Get Out, and then after that, he's just started being like this really solid one actor, and two, like they gave him like genuine roles instead of just giving him kind of like gangsters hype or anything like that. So I think Jordan Peele has done quite great service to what we need and we're looking for, honestly.
Yeah. Number one, Albert, I think now you have in your questions you asked the student. I think you have now just you can understand now why I didn't let you watch the black hood classes growing up.
All the hood classics, but I just wanted to be black. But anyway,
now you understand. And those questions you asked, you understand my point. Now it takes me back to when I first started working at Bloomsburg. A fight broke out in class, black students, and the professor asked them, why'd you do this? And the student responded, don't you know this is who we are? This is how black people act. And she was dead serious, and that was a painful realization for me. Because unfortunately that's the way that they were painted, because they self-fulfilling prophecy themselves. So how we're received in many ways is because of what we give. I'll put it this way. Denzel Washington has been a great actor forever. I remember seeing the first movie I ever saw him in versus now. He's been a great movie actor a long time. He got an Oscar for Training Day. He did not deserve that. That movie was awful. But he played Malcolm X, which he did a phenomenal job at. But it wasn't until he played the stereotypical crooked cop that he got the accolades. And I thought that was problematic. And very telling of Hollywood. So I think that's a couple of years ago, remember there was all that hullabaloo about Oscar so black or Oscar so white. That was from the idea that Oscar so white was based on the idea that black people were not being recognized. And then the next year, Oscar so black, they were being recognized for everything. But also, when you begin to think about it, and excuse my dog to listeners, she's in the cage and she's being loud.
Why you got her locked up in the cage? Why are you doing the pot? Anyway, keep going.
Because Wendy's loose. So
39 minutes, but I heard saying we're barking
Nothing.
that once.
The whole time.
That once.
So I have this a way of looking at this in one of my talks I give. You think about it, the way that white representation in films about educational institutions, being white in high school, for instance. You think about their schools. They go to these palatial campuses. There's never a teacher, never a parent. The kids are getting ready to go to college, or getting ready to graduate. They're good. They're not just going to any school. They're going to the Fortune 500 schools. They're just basically being students. They're just really trying to have fun, do what they got to do, and then graduate. You juxtapose that with black students in school. So when you think about the films are basically set in the urban jungle. The schools themselves look like prisons. They should be guards around. The schools are run down, and there's very, very little opportunity for them. So the students are, what are they getting ready for?
Trying to survive.
Right. But the bulk of it is that, these are based on true stories. Bulk of it is the students are really trying to pass a general skills class because they can't read. So nobody's getting ready to graduate. Nobody's getting ready to go to college. And schools are the parents. Schools and the parents are at odds with each other. The parents don't want anything for their children. The kids are just criminals. And there's not really anything happening for them. So again, they're not, just like you said, they're not getting a chance just to be black. There really is nothing happening for them. And so when you juxtapose those two experiences with each other, clearly you want to be white. So I think when I started writing, I wanted to give an alternative view. And I wanted people to think differently about the patterns that they're seeing.
Yeah.
It's always about kind of piggybacking on that. That just you notice, like, especially being an avid movie watcher, whenever there's a movie about any black student at all, it's always about them just trying to be successful,
overcoming everything. Yeah.
Getting out of the hood.
Right.
It's always I have to be better because we're struggling right now. We're poor, we're broke. I want to be successful, get my family out of here. It's always about that. And I completely, like in a way, it's all of us, because we all want to be successful. But it's the way that they present it, like picture it. It's like, oh, you're in this hood, you're in a really bad place. Watch where you're going. Be super careful because there's so much fighting out there. Guns, drugs, all this. You either get dragged into that or you don't. That's all that I see about that. I think I have yet to see, and I've seen a lot of movies, but there's also a lot of movies that I have not seen. But I have yet to see a movie where it's just like a regular place where a black student just goes to school, and the regular school, probably maybe even popular, just a kid, just going for one of those high class colleges or any of the stuff like that. But
and you're gonna see them, but again, when you've got, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, but when we do see movies like that do show black success stories, or even less the popular black athlete or school or student at the school, there's a reason he's the popular athlete or the popular black student is because he's an athlete, and his success is he's going on to go play football at XYZ University, and he's going to carry everybody out the hood through sports. And again, it's not just like, here's a kid with 4.0 GPA who's a regular guy who gets to go to, whatever school and just gets to kind of make his own decisions. All of his decisions are shaped by the fact that, he is a poor student and he wants to be better and he wants to overcome all the odds and all the things that have happened in his life to make him the better person that he aspires to be. And so I think that is the version of the black student that we see, if it's not just whatever. Excuse me. And so I want to talk about some positive representations that we've seen recently, and I want to talk about a couple examples. Dad, you've already mentioned one of them. We talked about Black Panther and how we finally got that representation in terms of superheroes, and I think that is really cool, especially now that we're starting to see more shows and movies that feature Black people as superheroes. Because again, I've loved superheroes my entire life. Cheney loves superheroes, but the majority of the superheroes that we know that are commonplace are white. Even though they're aliens and for the most part, they're aliens from different worlds, they are white showing, right? So then we get a movie like Black Panther. I mean, in the 80s, 90s, I don't know what it was. We had Wesley Snipes in Blade. They're redoing Blade with Mahershala Ali. I've never seen the original, but I love Mahershala Ali, so I'm excited to see what he's going to do in that role. When I was growing up, there was a show called Static Shock on TV. But even like all of these stories and superhero stories, we're getting some more representation where kids can see themselves as a superhero. But even, there are some times that we see these fictional characters, and they're represented, and these storytellers are trying to make them Black or trying to do a new version of that movie, and they're getting flack. What do you think about the positive representations that we're seeing in film, and what are your opinions on those remakes of movies that are being done? Not that they're being made Black, but they are featuring Black characters in traditionally non-Black roles, and kind of the outcry that is against that.
I think the outcry is unnecessary and stupid. Who is that? Chloe Bailey. And when they announced that she's going to be
Holly, I think actually. I don't think it's Chloe.
So this whole notion that she's there's all this hullabaloo because she's going to be the next Little Mermaid, but she's a fictional character,
and mermaids aren't real,
right? So I think that's same thing happened when what's that little girl? The
Quvenzhané Wallis.
Willis, yeah.
Black Annie.
She was Annie. There's a lot of people that were upset about that. I'm like, she's fictional. There's no color. And it's really interesting to me that people get mad when a Black actor is written into what they believe should be a white character. I know that there are people that had a problem with the way Rube was presented in
Hunger Games.
Hunger Games, yeah. When actually Rue was written as a Black character. And so it stood to reason that she was Black in the film. So there's no reason for all the hullabaloo because she was just being true to what she was written. But I think in terms of, the representation, I think is a good thing to take it back to superheroes again, like Miles Morales in the Amazing Spider-Man or the Spider-Verse. Representation is good. So, like I said, I thought Black Panther was a good thing, and unfortunately, we lost Chadwick Boseman a couple months later. And Letitia Wright would make a great Black Panther. But I think you're right, Auburn. It gives an opportunity for little Black kids across the country to see themselves in a positive role. It's the same. You're talking about representation and representation of struggle. And so very few people want to talk about slavery.
Mm-hmm.
I am one of those people that says we should talk about slavery more and more. And when I decided to write my second novel, San Judah First, Erase the Life of an Enslaved Soul, I really was fighting against the idea that Black people can be more than slaves.
Mm-hmm.
Because unfortunately, in our history, that's real.
Mm-hmm.
But not all of us were born as slaves. Not all of our families come from slavery. But that is a thing that unites us as Black people. And so it's a chance to, at least for me, to honor those who went through struggle and who survived some of the most brutal treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And they should be respected and celebrated and not forgotten. So I say let's write more about the slaves. Let's write more about the experience. What most people are bulking against is the idea of representation in the preponderance of the same image. It's part of the reason why I have a problem with Tyler Perry. Is not that he is a bad director. He's actually quite good. But my problem is he is seen as the voice of Black people for a lot of people. And so if he's the voice of Black America, what is he saying from a Black perspective? So I want people to think about the fact that just because Tyler Perry said it, showed it, does not mean that this is what it should be. So it's about seeing how often you see these images. So same thing with Tyler Perry. If you've seen one thing, you've seen all his things. All of his plays and all of his movies come from the same father. And I think it's more than just entertainment. So I say I want us to have a different image. And I think you're right, Cheney, that he does show a middle class sensibility that's tied to a lower class identity. So the idea that these are just normal people going about their everyday work or living, that's great. So that's just one side.
Mm-hmm.
So part of my difficulty is when you got to let Black people be human. No superpowers, just be who they are. That's one thing that I had to write. It kept in mind in writing my book. So I wrote about a slave experience, and I've never been a slave. I don't know anybody that has lived as a slave.
Sure hope not.
But I wanted to be true to her experience.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same manner, in writing about a 14-year-old girl who was kidnapped into slavery, I had to remember that she was just a little girl. She was a little girl
mm-hmm.
That was forced into slavery. She was not born a slave. She was forced into slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And she was still a little girl. So I tried to give her a sense of humanity. That I wanted to write about her hopes and dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to write about what her life could have been. So a lot of it is giving respect to where we come from. So it's the same way as a cook. You know this too, Alvin. All good soups come from a great stock.
Wait, there's no such thing as a good soup. Continue.
Mm-hmm. That's an honest belief.
I hate soup. I hate it. There's three that I will tolerate, but keep going.
But all good soups come from a great stock. So when I think about my family's background, and I don't know if we were slaves or not, but I do know this: it was that struggle that brought us to where we are today.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to look the slavery as a gift horse in the mouth. But I want people to understand that if slavery isn't your experience, that's something not to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something that we should want to run from it or hide from. Just got to recognize it's the people that survived slavery. They survived some of the most brutal, inhumane treatment, and they came out, but still breathing. So it's a reason to celebrate, not run from it.
Agree. I get that. Just more inclusion of some stories that are not that would be great. That's all I'm saying. All right. Well, any final thoughts or any final things that you want to share? I got one thing I want to do with you real quick before the show is over, but I just want to see if you have any final thoughts on the topic.
Tell real stories. All filmmakers and all writers tell real stories with real people with real problems that are authentic. I was thinking about stereotypes today, and thinking about stereotypes and how to get away with stereotypes is when you recognize humanity. Not all black people are criminals. Not all black people are poor. Not all black people are whatever.
Right.
So give them a sense of autonomy. Give them a sense of purpose. Give them real dreams and visions for themselves. Mm-hmm. So I was thinking about Harper Lee when she wrote To Kill a Mockingbird. Do you recall, Alvin, like what language they used to describe Tom?
I mean, kind of.
They didn't talk about his race, right?
No, I don't think so. Well, other than the fact that they called him the N-word 85 times.
So now think about if. Now I'm thinking as a writer, Harper Lee did not have any experience with being black.
Right, as a white woman, more than likely, she doesn't know what it's like to be a black man. Right.
So how does she write an authentic telling of what Tom must have gone through?
Right.
So now the idea is not to focus on his race, but as you think about him, Tom was a black man, and his blackness was purposeful for the theme of the show or the book. But he had to be more than just black.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, they made him a person.
Right. So as you're writing Cheney, keep in mind your characters that they need to be more than just window dressing. They have to have a reason to be there. Yeah, that's it.
All right, thank you so much. All right, what I want to do real quick, this might stretch you past where you're comfortable, but I want you, Mr. Dr. Reverend Dad, to give us your Mount Rushmore of black actors and actresses. So that's 4. Your top 4 could be your favorites, could be who you think are the best, but give us your Mount Rushmore of black actors and actresses in movies.
Denzel Washington, Viola Davis, Forrest Whitaker, and Regina King.
All right, Cheney, you didn't on that one. You don't know Regina King? You said.
Oh, Regina King, yeah.
Give me 3 Regina King movies.
Motherfucking.
The ham sandwich.
Oh, look. I'm not gonna look up the movies. I'm gonna look up what she looks like, and I know she.
Here, I'll show you what she looks like.
Okay, show me what she looks like. Because I can't get the picture of her, but I.
Well, the problem is you got Regina King.
Movie?
No, that's Regina Hall. I was just about to say you gotta know the difference between Regina King and Regina Hall.
Regina King.
This is Regina King.
See, I know her. What movie she been in? Take Easy Money.
Miss Congeniality.
She was in that, wasn't she?
Mm-hmm.
She was in a motherfucking.
You're so stupid. I'm so sick of you. All right, I'm
gonna look up the movies. I'm gonna be like, I knew.
The Harder They Fall. Did you watch that on Netflix? The country western black movie. It was a good movie, actually.
She was literally Riley and Boondocks.
She was just about everything.
I forgot.
She was in Friday. She was in Watchmen, One Night in Miami.
I can't believe I forgot what movie she been in.
He was director of Miami.
She was in Boys in the Hood, which I've never seen. But all right, it's a great top four. It's a great Mount Rushmore. Thank you so much, Dad, for pulling up to the podcast tonight. Thank you for all your words of wisdom to all aspiring authors, and for sharing with us your intellect in the field of movies and diversity. I think that there are a lot of really important talk points that you brought up tonight. And so I appreciate your wealth of knowledge and that you shared that with us and shared your time with us. This has been another episode of the AfroLatinos Podcast. This has been your co-host, Alvin.
And your co-host is currently Ian Chandler.
Find more information about his books and more information about him as a person at briancjohnson.net. You can find us on all digital podcast platforms and follow our socials, like, comment, subscribe, share, all of those wonderful things to all of our social media accounts. This has been another episode of the AfroLatinos Podcast. Good night, everybody.